Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. How is your Tuesday going? I wonder if you watch this in the morning, in the evening. I know we posted at different times, but I wonder if its effect varies based on when you watch it. So I hope your Tuesday's going well, and I do hope the words of James, that's what we're doing, take 5. I've promised only 5 minutes through the book of James. Very practical words. I hope they're helping your day and helping your week. The book of James has been described as the book of Proverbs for the New Testament because they're very, sometimes even pithy, but relevant, wise statements for everyday living, and especially what we're going to look at today. We ended yesterday with that enigma of James, such an enigma that the father of the Reformation, Martin Luther, almost didn't like this book. And the enigma was, we Protestants, we evangelicals, can I say that? Who believe that a salvation is only by faith. There's nothing you can do to earn it. There's nothing you can do to win it. It's simply given to us by God's grace, received by faith. And yet James comes along, and in the section that we read yesterday and will today, he says faith without works is useless. It can't save you. It's dead. And so Luther, who in a sense inaugurated the Protestant Reformation by saying sola fide, the Latin is only faith, he had a really hard time with it. So yesterday we began, and we're going to continue today to try to justify James with that statement of only faith. Martin Luther was a disciple in many ways of the Apostle Paul, who said, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, not by works," so no one can boast. You can't brag about your salvation because you didn't work for it. It was only given to you by God's grace, received through faith. And so James comes along and says faith and works are both necessary, otherwise your religion is useless. Luther struggled with that, and I want us to wrestle with that as well. So I'm going to read the passage, and then we'll talk a little bit about how faith and works come alongside each other in a healthy Christian life. Here's what he says. "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith and has no works? Can that faith save him?" That was yesterday, remember? Then here's today. He just gives an example of what he's trying to say. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warm and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? If you see a poor person, if you see someone clearly in need, and you just say, "Oh, be warm and filled," or even in some ways, I think we get off the hook just by saying, "Oh, I'll just pray for them," but you don't do anything of a good work to help them, what good is that? It's no good at all. And so after giving that illustration, he ends by saying, "So also faith by itself," like that example, those words by themselves didn't do any good. "So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." So now would be a good time to just reflect on our faith and what sort of works accompany it. In other words, I assume you're a follower of Christ. If you're not, you've already heard me say how it takes to become a follower of Christ. Simply faith. You don't work for it. You don't climb the ladder to get to God. God came down the ladder in the person of Christ to get to you, and you simply receive him. But to understand that faith then is just receiving it by faith, but then that faith will result in some good works. So I ask you, and I ask myself, tell me about the works of your faith, of your Christianity, that in a sense validate your faith. What are you doing for that person, like in this story, that validates your faith? What are you doing on a regular basis to benefit your own soul, your families, your community, your world? That's the kind of faith that saves, the faith that works for the good of others and the world at large. There was another German by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer that talked about cheap grace. And for him, cheap grace was something that had faith but nothing that accompanies it. And I want to end. I'm going to go over 5 minutes a little bit. I'm going to end just by reading Bonhoeffer on cheap grace. He says this: cheap grace as a doctrine, a principle, a system. It means forgiveness of sins proclaimed as a general truth, the love of God taught as the Christian concept of God. An intellectual assent to that idea is held to be of itself sufficient to secure remission of sins. That was grace. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ living and incarnate. In other words, it's simply just saying I believe something and it having no effect on our life at all. Let's go out and live a life of faith and works. Bonhoeffer called that costly grace. It cost Christ everything, and it might cost us obedience and discipline and goodness toward others. We'll continue this tomorrow on Take 5. I'll see you on Wednesday.